Go ahead.
Thank you, Your Honor. Commander Birchim, when you went out to serve Mr. Abdool and Mr. Chacon on the 29th of April of 1994, was it your purpose or intention to do an interview of them at that time?
No, it wasn't.
And you did not do an interview of them at that time, correct?
No, we didn't.
And you knew that they were going to be, pursuant to the subpoena, required to attend the Santa Barbara or Los Angeles County grand juries, correct?
That's correct.
Objection. Compound and calls for speculation.
I'll divide it up, Judge. No problem. The subpoena that you served Mr. Abdool with required him to appear in Los Angeles in front of the Los Angeles County grand jury on the 9th of May of 1994, correct?
Yes, correct.
And the subpoena that you served to Mr. Chacon also required him to be there on that particular day in Los Angeles before the Los Angeles County grand jury?
That's correct.
And that was in connection with allegations that had been made by a young child by the name of Jordan Chandler. Is that correct?
Objection. Calls for hearsay. Beyond the scope of direct.
Sustained.
Were you aware of the nature of the proceedings that were then underway in Los Angeles that required Mr. Chacon and Mr. Abdool to be subpoenaed?
Yes, I was.
Was that the matter of which you were investigating?
Yes.
And you had been assigned at that particular point as one of the lead investigators, correct?
That's correct, yes.
Would that be true also if I asked you the same question with regard to Mr. Chacon's appearance before the Los Angeles County grand jury?
That would be also true, yes.
And did the subject matter have to do with allegations against Mr. Jackson for child molestation?
Yes, they did.
Now, the next time that you met with Mr. Abdool and Mr. Chacon was on May the 5th, correct?
That's correct.
And that was at the Goleta area, Goleta Beach area?
No, it was at Gaviota Rest Stop.
Gaviota. And that meeting had been set up the day before, correct?
That's correct.
Now, it was in an area I think you described as a secluded area up there, is that correct?
Yes.
And the reason that you chose that particular area as being secluded is because they indicated to you that they were afraid, isn't that right?
That's right.
And that they were afraid that they may be followed or that somebody from Mr. Jackson's representatives would see them meeting with law enforcement authorities, correct?
That is correct, sir.
And at that meeting on the 5th, when you met with Mr. Kassim and with Mr. Abdool and Mr. Chacon, they indicated to you that they had actually had a meeting on the 3rd of May with representatives of Mr. Jackson's attorney team, correct?
Objection. Calls for hearsay. Beyond the scope of direct.
Overruled.
That's correct, yes.
And they indicated to you at that time that they had been offered the services of a free lawyer to appear before the Santa Barbara County, the Los Angeles County grand jury, correct?
Objection. Calls for hearsay. Beyond the scope of direct.
Hearsay objection as sustained.
Your Honor, I indicated it was a prior consistent statement involved here in the whole conversation. I don't want to say anything more, but there's.
When you say prior consistent statements have been offered, do you mean within this witness's testimony?
No, statements made by the other two individuals who, I believe, under 791, when there's been a.
What is this, your witness? Isn't that true, though? That would be outside the scope of the direct testimony?
Your Honor, I think it bears on the sequence of the total testimony that Mr. Sanger elicited. He elicited the sequence of events, but I don't want to argue with the court. I don't want to say anything to get myself in trouble, but there's more that happened in between that explains some of the conduct. That's all I'm suggesting to the court. And in fairness, let me withdraw that question, Your Honor, and ask another question.
All right.
See if I can get there another way without.
All right, go ahead.
Okay, because this one goes directly to. During that conversation that Mr. Sanger asked you about when you met with him on the 5th, do you recall that?
Yes.
And you recall Mr. Sanger asked you whether or not they disclosed any details to you on that particular occasion?
Yes.
Now, did they, in fact, tell you on that particular occasion that they had been asked to have representatives of Mr. Jackson present at the grand jury hearing and that they declined those services and told them they were simply going to tell the truth and they didn't need a lawyer for that?
Objection. That is grossly compound, a speech by the district attorney. It should be stricken, and it also calls for hearsay and it's beyond the scope of direct.
The objection is overruled. You may answer.
Yes.
Did they tell you whether or not, after that conversation with Mr. Jackson's lawyers on May 3, whether or not they'd ever been contacted by an investigator representing Mr. Jackson?
Yes.
And did they give you?
Objection. Calls for hearsay and it's beyond the scope of direct.
Overruled. The answer was, yes. Next question.
When did they tell you that they received a contact from, well, first let me get to the name. Who was, they identified the person as Mr. Mason, did they not?
Objection. Calls for hearsay, beyond the scope of direct.
Overruled.
Yes, Eric Mason.
And when did they tell you that contact occurred?
I believe it was at Gaviota. It may have been at the meeting in your office. I don't recall when.
And that the meeting had occurred prior to the time that they had contacted you, correct?
That's right.
And at the meeting that Mr. Sanger asked you about at Gaviota on May 5, 1994, both Mr. Abdool and Chacon indicated to you that they could be in danger from Mr. Jackson's people if they told what they knew, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And they were worried about that?
Objection. Calls for speculation.
I'll rephrase it. And they told you they were worried about that, did they not?
Yes, they did.
And the reason that they didn't want to say anything to you at that point in time is because they wanted to meet with the district attorney's office to discuss the fact of getting protection before they went into the details of what they knew. Isn't that correct?
Objection. Calls for speculation. It's also compound.
Overruled. You may answer.
Yes, that's correct.
And in the same meeting at Gaviota, when you were talking to Mr. Chacon and to Mr. Abdool, they told you that, they indicated to the attorneys representing Mr. Jackson in that meeting that they intended to tell the truth in front of the grand jury, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And they told you that, in the call from Mr. Mason, that they indicated to Mr. Mason that they were going to tell the truth when they testified before the grand jury?
Yes, that's correct.
Now, moving to the conversation on the 6th of May that occurred in the district attorney's office, both Mr. Abdool and Mr. Chacon expressed grave concerns about protection, correct?
Objection, Your Honor, particularly the adjective. Calls for speculation and it's vague.
I'll withdraw that and just leave the word. It doesn't make any difference. I'm sorry. During the meeting on the 6th, at the district attorney's office, did Mr. Chacon express to you concerns about the safety of him and his family?
Yes, he did.
Did Mr. Abdool express to you concerns about his safety and that of his family during that conversation?
Yes, he also did.
And did they actually ask for somebody connected with our offices, the Santa Barbara Sheriff's Department and the District Attorney's Office, to explore the possibility of a federal protection witness program if they went before the grand jury and told the truth?
Yes, they did.
And were they told at that particular point in time that there were no assurances that that kind of protection could be given even if they testified?
That's correct.
Did Mr. Chacon indicate to you at that time that that in speaking to law enforcement, he believed that he was placing himself at great risk?
Objection. Asked and answered.
Sustained.
Now, you indicated to Mr. Sanger that in discussing the conversation that occurred on May 6 of 1994, that Mr. Abdool and Mr. Chacon, let me take them separately, that Mr. Abdool was doing most of the talking, is that correct? Do I have the conversations mixed up?
On the 5th at Gaviota?
Yes.
Yeah, he was doing most of the talking.
How about at the 6th at the meeting?
They spoke at that.
Okay. During that conversation on the 6th where you were present and representatives of the DAs were present, office, did they relate to you, or they did relate to you, did they not, that they had information about Michael Jackson fondling, passionately kissing on the mouth and sucking the penis of small boys?
Objection, Your Honor. First of all, that misstates the evidence, unless counsel's got another report he hasn't turned over.
It's right here.
No, it's not right there. I know what it says.
The objection is overruled. You may answer.
They indicated they may have that evidence. Yes, they did.
I couldn't hear you.
They did indicate that they had that knowledge or had knowledge about who might have that knowledge. Yes.
And it was related in a hypothetical, correct?
Yes.
But the words they used was that they said Michael Jackson fondling, correct?
Objection. Asked and answered.
Sustained.
And also misstates.
Now, when, to your knowledge, did Mr. Abdool appear before the Los Angeles County Grand Jury on the day that he was supposed to?
Yes.
Objection. Beyond the scope of direct.
Sustained.
Were you present during a conversation where Mr. Chacon was called in and appeared before his statement was taken under oath?
Objection. Beyond the scope of direct.
I believe these qualify under 791.
I think the question is vague. I can't tell exactly what you're referring to.
I'll clarify it. On May 10, 1994, Mr. Chacon appeared before an individual, or appeared in a hearing and was placed under oath. Were you present then?
Objection. First of all, that's a statement, not a question. And its compound assumes facts not in evidence.
Sustained.
And it's beyond the scope of direct.
Sustained.
Were you present on May 10 when Mr. Chacon was brought in and his statement was taken under oath?
Beyond the scope of direct.
Sustained.
Is that the basis, Your Honor? I don't want to quibble with the court. If it is, I'll just move on.
It is, I think, beyond the scope.
Commander Birchim, were you, in fact, later assigned to investigate death threats that were received by both Mr. Abdool and Mr. Chacon?
Objection. Your Honor, beyond the scope of direct.
Sustained.
To your knowledge, were official reports filed with law enforcement agencies concerning death threats against Mr. Chacon and Mr. Abdool?
Objection. Your Honor, counsel is just testifying. I ask he be admonished. It's beyond the scope of direct.
Objection sustained.
Nothing further, Your Honor.
Excuse me just 1 second. Okay, now, the fact is that Mr. Abdool and Mr. Chacon said to you they might have to go to the tabloid, or the tabloids were interested in purchasing stories from them. Is that right?
They said they had information that would be valuable to the tabloids.
Okay, and they said they weren't going to do that, right?
That's correct.
And you're aware that they, in fact, did that. Isn't that right?
That's correct.
Object is argumentative.
Overruled. The answer is in. That's correct, he said.
Do you know whether or not these two people joined with others and filed a lawsuit against Mr. Jackson for money?
Yes, they did.
And by the end of the conversations that you had at the rest stop and the meeting with Mr. Sneddon, neither one of these people reported to you what they claimed to know. Is that correct?
Object is argumentative, Your Honor. And leading.
Overruled. You may answer.
They indicated hypothetically what information they may have.
They didn't say they had it. They said they might know that somebody might have that.
Information that would come from them.
And they asked you if that would be valuable to you, didn't they?
Yes.
Okay, I have no further questions.
With regard to the lawsuit that Mr. Sanger was talking to that Mr. Kassim or Mr. Abdool and Mr. Chacon were involved in against the defendant in this case, to your knowledge, did that lawsuit occur after they had made the statement to you that they felt morally obligated to reveal this information to a grand jury?
Yes.
And did it occur before they were threatened?
Objection. Your Honor, calls for speculation.
I can lay the foundation, but seems to me he opened it up.
The objection is sustained on the question.
All right, no further questions.
All right, did at any time, during these meetings, Mr. Abdool and Mr. Chacon mention that James Van Norman was threatening them?
Your Honor, I'm going to object as beyond the scope of whatever it was I did, cross.
Overruled. Go ahead.
Specifically Jimmy Van Norman, I believe they did, yes.
And did you believe at the time that they were trying to use law enforcement for the purpose of helping them win a civil case?
No, I did not.
I have no further questions.
Nothing further.
You may step down.
Your Honor, I take it you intend to go to 2:30?
Yes.
Okay, I just knew there was something pending, so I just wanted to know. In any event, we'll call Mr. Vivanco. And what we propose to do is start with testimony that doesn't have to do with the areas that we're under.
That's good. That would work.
I may run out. We'll see how long it takes.
You may run out.
I don't want to just prolong it unnecessarily to get to 2:30, but I do have some question areas and we'll go through those, if that's all right.
Okay, that works. When you get to the witness stand, please remain standing. Face the clerk here and raise your right hand.
Yes.
Please be seated. State and spell your name for the record.
Angel Vivanco.
Take a seat and speak in here.
Oh, Angel Vivanco. Angel Vivanco.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Vivanco, you know the gentleman seated right there?
Yes.
And is that Mr. Jackson?
Yes.
And how do you know him?
I worked for him for 3 years.
All right, do you still work for him?
No.
Where do you work now?
At Radco Company.
Okay, when you worked for Mr. Jackson for that 3-year period, what were your job duties?
I was a chef assistant.
And what was the time period that you worked for him? You started right around when?
99 through 2003, I think.
Okay, about when in 2003 did you cease working for, or whenever you stopped? Do you remember when it was? Was it 2003?
Yes.
Okay, when in 2003 was it that you stopped working for Mr. Jackson?
I don't remember what month it was. But it was, I think it was 6 months ago. Or 7 months ago.
Okay, so if it was 6 or 7 months ago, if this is 2005, what year would that be? It's okay.
Sorry.
Take your time.
I don't remember the month, actually. I don't remember the month.
But it was 2005. Was it in 2004 that you stopped working?
2003.
2003. Okay, and you think it was 6 or 7 months ago from today?
Yeah.
Okay, alright, now, let's clear something up while we're at it here. Where do you live?
Santa Maria.
And where did you live in February of 2003?
Guadalupe.
Guadalupe. Your Honor, with the court's permission, I'd like to put up on the board Exhibit 451, and I'm going to go to tab 5 in the page. I think the way we identified it is this was a phone bill, March 26th, of David Ventura, and it's 8 to 1 of 9, 8 to 2 of 9, and 5 to 4 of 5. And those pages are, there's one page in between them, but that's what they are.
All right.
These are exhibits already in evidence.
Who's doing this?
I am.
Do you know which one this is?
Yes. Go ahead.
May I? Thank you. I'm going to put up. Let's see if I can do it this way. I have to hold the book, so I'm going to try to hold it steady. Try to hold it steady and project my voice from here. I want you to look up at the board. And after you get through looking at the board, you can turn back around and talk into the microphone. But do you see the 2 lines there that say, Guadalupe, California?
Yes.
And then you see next to it, it says, 805, right? Do you see that right next to it?
Yes.
And it says, 343 minus 5002. Do you see that?
Yes.
Do you recognize that phone number?
Yes, I do.
Is that your phone number?
Yes.
Is it still your phone number?
No.
Why not?
I don't live in Guadalupe anymore.
So you moved?
Yes.
Alright, in February of 2003, was that your phone number?
Yes.
I'll just put that one page up, so I won't need the screen anymore at the moment. Alright, let me ask you, when you were working for Mr. Jackson, I think you said, what, starting in 1999?
Yes.
At some point, did you have occasion to meet the Arvizo family?
Yes.
Can you remember the first time you met the Arvizo family?
No.
Okay, I'm not asking you for a date, but do you remember first meeting them in general, first seeing them?
Yes.
Okay, do you remember who was with them the first time you saw them?
I saw them with their mother.
Okay, and do you remember the mother's name?
Yes.
What's her name?
Janet.
Alright, and who, when you say, them, who is the them? Who did you see with Janet?
Her children, Star, Gavin and Devellin.
Alright, and can you tell us what they were doing at the ranch when you first saw them there?
They were visiting the ranch.
Alright, now, do you recall if this is a time when, or do you recall roughly when this was?
No, I don't.
Was it closer to the beginning of your employment or the end of your employment?
The beginning.
Alright, did you see them there with their father at any time?
No.
I'm sorry, could you speak a little louder?
It's not just you. Everybody has trouble with that microphone. You really have to lean into it. Okay. And then speak up. Alright, now, at some point, do you recall seeing the Arvizos, at least the children, at the ranch when Mr. Jackson was not there?
Yes.
Do you recall who it was that had invited them to the ranch?
I'm going to object as speculative. Lack of foundation.
Sustained.
Do you recall who it was that they were with visiting the ranch?
They were with their mother.
Was there anybody else that was there?
The brother and sisters, Star and.
Is that the first time you saw them?
Yes.
Alright, let's fast forward a little bit and go on in time. Was there some point when they were there for a birthday party?
Yes.
Okay, and whose birthday party was that? Do you recall?
I don't remember the occasion.
Okay, do you remember a movie star of some sort being there with them?
No.
Okay, you recall a birthday party of some sort, though, is that right?
Yes.
You don't know whose birthday party it was?
No.
Did you have occasion to have interaction with Star Arvizo during that period of time?
Yes.
And do you remember anything unusual?
I'm going to object as vague as to what period of time.
Sustained.
Okay, during the period of time when they were visiting during this birthday party. You recall it was a birthday party, right?
Yes.
And they're visiting?
Object as vague as to what period of time.
Overruled. You may answer.
Did we not get an answer to the last question?
The last question was, and they were there visiting? And I think you might have been interrupted.
Alright, let me restate that, then. When they were visiting during this birthday party, was Mr. Jackson there at the ranch?
No.
Alright, now, that period of time. I'm talking about this birthday party period of time when they're visiting, and Mr. Jackson's not there. Do you recall having any interaction with Star Arvizo?
No.
Okay, what was your job during that period of time? Where did you work?
I was a chef assistant.
Chef assistant?
Yes.
So where did you do that job?
What did I do?
Where did you do it? Where were you? Where did you stand?
I was at the theater.
Okay.
And I would serve food for them.
Okay, where did you get the food to serve?
From the kitchen at the main house.
Okay, take a deep breath or two here. I know it's hard sometimes. Where were you working? In other words, when you showed up, where was the main place that you'd be working during the day?
At the main house.
Okay, and where in the main house?
In the kitchen.
There you go. And the kitchen has like a counter, is that right?
Yes.
And people sit there?
Yes.
Alright, now, you said something about the theater. What was that about?
Oh, well, I would sometimes take food to the theater when they asked for it.
So you would get a call. Somebody would call and ask you to bring food to the Arvizo kids at the theater?
Yes.
All of the kids? Gavin, Star and Devellin?
Not all together. Just sometimes one at a time, or sometimes together, you know.
Alright, do you recall any of the kids asking you to prepare something with alcohol in it?
Yes.
What was that? Tell us about that incident.
It was a milkshake.
Vague as to time.
I'll sustain the objection. But I'm assuming that this is all around the date of the birthday, right?
That's my understanding. Let's just ask to be sure. Was that the same trip as the birthday?
No.
It was a different trip?
Yes.
Okay. Was Mr. Jackson there at the premises when this occurred?
No.
Objection. Lack of foundation.
Overruled.
The answer came in, I think?
It's in. It was, no.
Alright, now, on that occasion, what was the incident? What happened? You were asked to prepare a drink with alcohol?
Just a minute. Michelle, do you need a little break here?
I think I'm fine now. Thanks.
Go ahead.
Okay, tell us about that occasion when one of the boys asked you to prepare an alcohol drink.
He was at the bar, in the kitchen.
Do you remember which one it was? Star or Gavin?
It was Star.
Alright, and what did Star say to you?
He asked me to make him a milkshake.
Alright,
And I made it for him, and he pointed at the cabinets full of liquor, and he pointed out one of the bottles and asked me to pour some in the milkshake.
okay, what was in the bottle?
Liquor.
Okay, do you remember which kind?
It was a Mexican kind. It was called Jimador.
He was asking you to put that in the milkshake?
Yes.
Alright, did you do that?
Yes.
You put the alcohol in the milkshake?
Yes.
Okay, before you put it in the milkshake, did Star say anything to you?
Yes.
What did he say?
He told me if I didn't do it, he would tell Michael, and I would get fired.
So then you put the alcohol in the milkshake?
Yes.
Do you recall Gavin ever having any particular incident with you?
Yes.
Can you tell us about that?
Be more specific.
Was there a time that Gavin asked you for some Cheetos?
I'm going to object as irrelevant.
No.
Overruled.
Do you recall him asking for some food of some sort?
I don't remember.
Okay, do you remember if Gavin ever swore at you?
Oh, yes.
What did he do?
I'll object as irrelevant.
He just swore at me.
I'll object as irrelevant.
Overruled. You may answer.
He just swore at me and asking for some Cheetos or saying,
You can say it. Tell us what he said.
give me the fucking Cheetos. That's what he said.
Okay, now, was there an incident that occurred with Star in the kitchen involving a knife?
Yes.
And can you tell us about that?
I was serving some guests on the bar some food, and he was helping us that day to cook.
Star was in there helping you in the kitchen area?
Yes, he asked to help. So we let him. I was serving a plate to one of the guests, and he had a knife like 1 inch on my neck.
Okay, what kind of a knife was it?
It was a kitchen knife.
Do you recall about how big it was?
It was 9 inches. Or, a foot long. It was a foot.
A foot?
Yes.
What was the knife for? What kind of a knife was it?
It was to cut meat.
Did you keep that pretty sharp in your kitchen?
Yes.
And you said he had it about an inch from your neck. What was he doing with it when he put it an inch from your neck?
He just had it holding up onto my neck. And I didn't realize it until one of the guests yelled at Star, saying, "What are you doing?"
Who was the guest? Do you recall?
It was Vinny.
Alright, and do you recall what Vinny said?
He said,
I'll object as hearsay.
Overruled.
He said, if that was my mother seeing me doing that, I would get a beating.
Alright, he was saying that, he was directing those remarks to Star?
Yes.
Now, how did you react to that? How did you feel about that?
I didn't really think nothing of it.
Were you scared?
Sort of, yeah. Mostly, well, it made me nervous.
Okay, alright. Do you recall a time when Star showed you some magazines?
Yes.
Was this a time when Mr. Jackson was on the property?
No, he was not on the property.
Was this near the time of the birthday party or near the beginning of your employment, or towards the end?
Towards the end.
Okay, now, do you remember? There was the Bashir documentary. Do you remember that?
Yes.
Do you remember? That came out on television at some point, right?
Yeah.
Do you remember if this family came to the ranch after the Bashir documentary?
No.
Okay, before the Bashir documentary, do you remember the family being there? When I say family, I mean the kids.
Yes.
Alright, when Star showed you the magazine, and Mr. Jackson wasn't there, was that before the Bashir documentary or after it?
It was after.
It was after the Bashir documentary?
Yes.
Okay, so do you then recall them being at the ranch after the Bashir documentary?
Yes.
Okay, alright. Now, you said you served food or you were responsible for being an assistant cook. Do you know whether or not Star and Gavin would take food to the guest unit?
Yes.
Alright, and did they do that?
Yes.
Alright, now, after the Bashir documentary, Do you remember seeing Janet Arvizo at the ranch?
Yes.
Do you know somebody by the name of Dieter Weisner?
Yes.
Was Dieter Weisner at the ranch in that same period of time?
Yes.
Now, how long was the family at the ranch after the Bashir documentary, before they left for the last time?
Probably about 2 to 3 weeks maybe.
And during that period of time, did you see Janet Arvizo come out to the kitchen area or come into the kitchen area where you were working?
No.
Okay, when I say kitchen area, I don't mean going in the actual kitchen, but in the kitchen area, you have a counter, right?
Yes.
Did you ever see Janet Arvizo come to that counter?
After the Martin Bashir?
Yes.
No. After that, no.
Okay, did you see the Martin Bashir video when it came out?
Yes.
Alright, so your recollection is you saw her there before the Martin Bashir video?
Yes.
Did you see her there with Dieter?
Yes.
Okay, now, let me ask you what you recall about her being there with Dieter. Okay, I want you to get a mental picture of what was going on. As best you can, try to remember what happened. You see Janet Arvizo coming into the area. What do you call that area where the counter is?
The bar.
The bar. Okay, you see her coming into the bar. And were you there when she arrived the first time, or do you recall?
Yes.
Where was Dieter?
He was sitting at the bar.
Okay, and were they sitting next to each other to begin with?
No.
What do you recall happened after that?
They started talking.
Okay.
And they asked for a bottle of champagne.
Okay, now, was Dieter talking to Janet, or Janet to Dieter, or were they both talking to each other?
Well, I don't know who started the conversation, but it seemed Janet started talking to Dieter.
Okay, did they remain at their places at the bar?
No, they got closer together.
Okay, how long did they sit at the bar together that first time?
For a couple hours.
Okay, do you recall Janet Arvizo's demeanor, how she was acting?
Flirtatious.
Okay, after they sat at the bar for that period of time, did they go anyplace else?
They went to the living room.
Okay, and where is the living room?
Couple steps to the right.
Okay, there's like a formal living room and then there's a family room area, is that correct?
Yes.
Did they go to the family room or the living room?
The family room.
And are there couches there in the...
Yes.
Where did they sit?
They sat next to each other in front of the TV.
Okay, and what were they doing?
They kept on talking.
Alright, were they drinking anything?
Yes.
What were they drinking?
The champagne they ordered.
Alright, do you recall how long they sat there in the family room area?
A couple more hours.
And then during that period of time, what was Janet Arvizo's attitude?
Flirtatious.
So just continued on the entire time?
Yes.
And did they seem to be having a good time?
Yes.
Did they eventually leave?
Yes.
And did they leave together or separately that first time?
The first time, together.
And do you recall them saying anything on the way out?
No.
Alright, do you know where they went?
No.
Alright, so they went out the door together?
Yes.
Okay, did you see them again that night?
No.
Now, did you see them again the next day?
Yes.
And what happened that day?
The same thing. They ordered champagne again, and they were talking together.
Okay.
After dinner.
And when they left the area, how did Janet seem? What was her attitude?
Different. It was more, like, serious.
Okay.
They just talked. They didn't really flirt as much as they did the other day.
Did she seem to be happy or unhappy?
More.
I'm going to object as speculative.
Sustained.
Were you able to determine by observing her whether or not she seemed to be happy or unhappy?
Objection. Speculative.
That would be a yes or no.
I'll overrule the objection.
Were you able to determine, by looking at her, whether she seemed to be happy or unhappy?
She seemed more serious.
Object to anything beyond yes or no.
Sustained.
Did you see whether or not Dieter Weisner and Janet Arvizo had any physical contact?
No.
Did either one hug the other?
Objection. Leading.
Sustained.
Alright, that was the second night. Now, was there another night?
I don't remember if there was a third night.
Okay, alright. Now, during this period of time, did you have occasion to talk with Devellin?
Yes.
And what was your first contact with Devellin Arvizo, social contact, as it were? What were the circumstances, in other words?
Well, if she asked for something, like a hamburger or something, I would make it for her. That's the only way I could talk to her.
Okay, and you'd make something for her. Would she come and get it or would she ask you to deliver it?
Well, at first she would sit at the bar and I would serve it to her.
At some point, did she have you deliver food to her?
Yes.
And where would you deliver it?
To the theater.
Was she at the theater alone?
No.
Who was with her?
Well, actually she asked me to take her to the theater with the food.
Oh, with the food. Okay.
Yes.
Now, was she at the theater more than once?
Yes.
Was she at the theater with anybody from time to time?
I don't remember. Maybe her brothers were there with her.
Okay. Did she, after you drove her to the theater that one time, did she ask you to come back and bring her food there on other occasions?
No, not there.
Other places?
Yes.
Alright. What was your shift? When did you usually work?
7 o'clock in the morning till maybe 10 o'clock at night.
Alright, so you'd be there in case guests or anybody or Mr. Jackson needed food, is that right?
Yes.
Alright, now, I know it's not quite 2:30, and I could probably drag some questions out, but I really think we're at a point we need to address the other issues, Your Honor, if we could.
All right, you're asking to recess early so you can.
So we can address that. Yes, sir.
Okay, we'll recess early today. I'll see you tomorrow at 8:30. You're going to have that for me in the morning, are you?
Yes. I could have it this afternoon maybe, if that's of any help.
The earlier the better.
Okay,